We are excited to kick off week 2 here on 24/7 Sports. It is Arkansas at 17th ranked Oklahoma State. Super excited about this old school matchup. And here to help us break down one of the biggest games of the weekend, we've got Trey Biddy from Hog Sports and McLean Baxley from Go Pokes 24/7. And let's remind you of this matchup. Like I said, it's been 4 decades since we've seen this team played. It's been since 1980. But before that, we got it quite frequently. Arkansas leading the all-time series 30-15-1. The Razorbacks trying to flip the script, having lost 10 straight road games against ranked opponents. Let's start with a highlight in this game that, of course, will be running back Ollie Gordon. Excited to see him out on the field. So let's start with, how does Oklahoma State let him cook? And then I want to know how Arkansas will contain him. So McLean, start us off with the poke side of things.
Yeah, Ollie Gordon, he had another 100-yard game against South Dakota State last Saturday, and it was kind of a quieter game. We're getting used to 150, 200-yard games from Gordon, but he, just averaged over 100 yards in that first game, and he did good against a pretty good South Dakota State defensive line. Made his own holes and really just kind of worked those extra yards. It'll be a more difficult test on Saturday against a bigger and maybe more experienced Arkansas front. But yeah, the offensive line is cooking. The Ollie Gordon doing what he does best and just kind of extending plays and doing more with his body than we saw last year.
Yeah, well, Arkansas is pretty athletic up front. They've got a lot of starters back on the defensive line, led by Landon Jackson, Eric Gregory, Cam Ball. A pretty good defensive line, and I really like their linebacker core. What I was noticing in fall camp was they were trying to get more linebackers out on the field doing different formations and stuff, so that tells you that they really like that group. Ollie Gordon's a fantastic back, reminds me a little bit of Eddie George, so he's going to be a tough tackle. One thing he does is people bounce off of him, and he doesn't do much. So you're going to have to get a lot of players to Ollie Gordon, gang tackling. You should be watching on your screen players just diving over the pile. If they're not doing that, if they're pulling up like, oh, he's got it, then he'll break off a long run and slip a tackle. So you've got to gang tackle him. You've got to, near shoulder, near hip, fundamentals, just be very aggressive and very attacking to stop this guy.
Certainly be a group effort for the Arkansas defense. Speaking of group effort, the offensive line really for both of these teams will be key in this game. So I want to know what the biggest concern for your team's offensive line is. Trey, how about Arkansas?
Well, they were part of the reason Arkansas gave up 49 sacks last year, which led the SEC. Not the only reason, but a big part of it. And they brought in 3 key transfers: Keyshawn Blackstock at right tackle, Fernando Carmona at left tackle, and Addison Nichols at center. Now, those are good players, but the thing that would concern me a little bit is they just kind of came in as like, okay, these guys are starting. And like, where's the competition? So I wonder about that a little bit. Patrick Kudus has been out. He only practiced 2 times in fall camp. They moved to Marion Harris from tackle to guard in his spot. And, Sam Pittman told me that Marion Harris isn't like the 5th best guy. He's maybe 3 or 4 or something like that. So they feel pretty good about him. But I wonder, like, if there's an injury or something, then do they move Marion back out to tackle? If it's a tackle, do they have an SEC quality guard? So the depth a little bit is what would concern me with the offensive line. But I have no doubt that they're a better group than they were last year. It's just how much better. And we're gonna find out a lot about it on Saturday.
And for Oklahoma State, this is, the most experienced offensive line in college football. These guys have played a lot of football, both in Stillwater and, a couple of transfers that have played elsewhere. But they know what to do. They know what's going to happen with the guy on their left and right. And I think the big thing that they're going to be looking at on Saturday and as the season goes on is, when teams stack the box, can they still create holes for Ollie Gordon? Can they still, do what they need to do in the rushing game? We saw on Saturday that South Dakota State did a pretty good job of loading the box and making life difficult for the runner, whether that was Ollie Gordon or one of the backups. But against an Arkansas, SEC big boy defensive line, how can they hold up for 4 quarters of creating running lanes for Gordon?
All right, guys. Sometimes I have well thought out, eloquent questions, but other times I just defer to the experts. You are our boots on the ground coverage. You know what we should be talking about. So I want to ask you, what is the most critical matchup to watch in this game? Let's start with Arkansas. Trey.
Well, for me, I've always watched Oklahoma State, and they love to throw that deep fade pass. And like, you get a guy like Ollie Gordon going, and then it's hard, I think, for a defense not to just start creeping up and trying to stop the run. And when you do that, they're going to throw deep on you. So to me, it's about being disciplined, especially with that throw, because they do it so well going back as far as I can remember. So to me, like guys like Jaden Johnson and TJ Metcalf, the safeties, Hudson Clark, and then, the corners who will be manned up sometimes, just being really disciplined and not getting beaten by that throw when a guy like Gordon is just being pounded at him. Just staying disciplined and focused and knowing that that's coming, because it is.
For Oklahoma State, I mean, it's hard to just say the whole defense is a matchup, but I mean, the defense is definitely on the weakest link of this team right now, especially in that secondary. How they hold up against Arkansas team that threw 400 yards. It was Arkansas Pine Bluff, not a super high caliber team, but the secondary got beat last week for Oklahoma State against South Dakota State. So how can they play against a SEC caliber team? How can they play against guys that are faster and quicker than South Dakota State was? So that's one thing that I'm kind of looking at. It's gonna be an early test for this tested pretty young still rebuilding secondary. How can they hold up against an SEC team?
All right, we had to wait 44 years for this matchup, and we got a little antsy here, so we actually simulated this game 20 times on EA College Football 25, and this one, it was pretty even. Oklahoma State finishing with 11 wins. So I'm going to ask you for each team. Let's start with the team who won the fake game. McLean, what's the biggest key to pulling out a win in the real game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be that toughness factor. They're experienced, they're talented. Oklahoma State knows what they want to do. They know what their goals are going to be, and it's going to be, in the trenches and really being able to run the ball well against a, like I said, an experienced and talented defensive front, and really just setting the tone there in the trenches. And on the opposite side, defensive line getting pressure on Taylen Green, not letting them run all over them, and just kind of setting the tone in the trenches is going to be the key to Oklahoma State coming out with a win and starting the season 2-0.
I always think that penalties, turnovers, special teams, injuries, they always play such a huge role in these games, but those are obvious. I would probably say, maybe like for Arkansas it sounds ridiculous, but like winning the game, because winning the game is the secret to winning the game, because they would go on the road last year. They went to Tuscaloosa and lost by 3. They went to Oxford and lost by 7. They went to Baton Rouge and lost by 3. This is a team that won 4 games last year, and they were competitive, but they didn't know how to win and how to finish a game. Can this team march down the field if they have to? Can the defense stop the other team if they have to? Can they protect a lead by running the ball? These are all things that they had problems with at the end of the season, or at the end of games last year, just completing the win. Arkansas went 1-5 in one possession games last season. I have no doubt that this will be close. Arkansas was very good on the road last year, but they weren't able to get over that hump and win the game at the end. So the secret to winning the game for Arkansas is winning in the end.
I mean, you might think that sounds a little ridiculous, but any coach that's potentially watching this is like, exactly. That's what we need to do is complete that win and to, as you said, win the game. We'll see who does on Saturday. Thank you both so much for breaking down this matchup. Keep it locked into Hog Sports for all things Arkansas football, and go Pokes 24/7 for everything you need to know about Oklahoma State. The writers you just heard from and their entire crew, they have you covered all season long.